Thanks for listening to Fluff and Crunch, where we talk about the connection and sometimes disconnect between system, setting, and story in tabletop RPGs. There we go. Good morning, Chris, or good day.
Hi, Jeremy.
How are you?
I'm better than I was last week.
Good, good. So you had some kind of a yuck?
Yeah, I think I was like starting to pick up Annie had got a cold when we were in Florida, which is ironic because it's hot.
Yeah.
But she'd got a cold and then she was starting to get over it, and then I started getting it, and then it seemed to go away, and then I think like halfway through last week it started like coming back. Probably like lack of sleep or jet lag or whatever else. I don't know. So I started feeling really, really crappy. And then having like had an extra sleep in to get over it on Friday, and then did my back in. So now my cold's mostly gone, but my back hurts. So
What did you do?
I have no idea. I assume I slept funny or twisted or.
You reached down and tied your shoes.
Yeah, it's the age.
That can be troublesome when you're in your 40s.
Mika keeps laughing at me every time I like get up, and I'm like, "Ooh," she's like, "You're so old."
I finally broke down and I bought one of those like a long metal shoehorn because I have some dress shoes that I don't want to smoosh the back of. So I put them on. Every time I do that, I'm like, this is lame. I blame the shoes. It's not my fault. It's the shoes. So, did you do any gaming this last weekend, or were you laid up with chicken soup?
No, I did. I did manage to get our gaming session in, which Scott did actually run a session. We ran a kind of a truncated session, partly because I was talking about Florida, and also partly because I wanted to get an early night in. So we did manage to play another session with Scott. So we did what he did last time. We're like, right, so we're on the ship. No, I forgot about the ship. Oh, so like we were like, so all of the Ulysses 31 stuff we said we were going to do. Yeah. You're gonna meet a god, but you're not going to piss him off. Oh, okay. So, okay, well, it's your game. It's fine. So that was quite good. He'd come up with a kind of a set of trials and stuff. So we had a couple of puzzles and things to play through. So it was good fun.
Cool.
How about you?
We did another session of the 5e campaign in which I'm playing. Moving along. It's hard. It's hard. It's just so strange to me. I mean, the story's cool. The story's interesting, and it's definitely like a long-term, multi-layered. There's a mystery. There's some mystery elements to it, and so it's one of these things that requires note-taking and requires communication and asking questions of the people around the table and staying on top of things and picking up on clues and cues, and that's fun. The system is just lame. The longer I play it, the less interested I am in playing 5e ever again. It's just I don't know. It's weird. I don't like Savage Worlds, but Savage Worlds is like tepid oatmeal, it's just there and you just kind of feel it a little bit. And I'd almost rather play something that doesn't even pretend, to be so awesome. It's the 5th edition of the world's greatest role-playing game. Yeah, and it's crap.
Yeah, it just doesn't bother me. I find it relatively inoffensive. I don't find that it gets in the way that much because it is so simple.
But the problem is
it doesn't bother me.
It's like teaching in a strange way. Like I think that it doesn't get in the way, but it adds nothing, which means it's like you're using your time. I'm using my time, and I'm playing an interesting story with a system that doesn't add anything to it. Doesn't make and it. My comment about teaching is I used to say that the best a bad teacher could do is waste the kid's time. Yeah, like there's no such thing as do no harm in teaching. If you're a crappy teacher, the best outcome you can have as a crappy teacher is to just waste their time, which is like criminal because they can never get that time back.
Yeah.
But the way I see it is, it's just like, well, we've got this cool story, we've got some ideas, and then this system is just bleh. It does nothing to add to or help deliver.
I think it's
It's
more
like a
that
decent meal on paper plates.
I think 5e is the framework that, the main two things it's got is they've got the framework for building the characters and there's a framework for building monsters. And that's all it needs. So you have the framework for the characters to stop the characters going completely off and crazy and doing whatever you want, which can
Well,
happen in
then they
other
do that
systems.
by sixth or seventh level
Yeah,
anyway.
no, they're not that. But
Yes, they
the thing is, you
do.
can. Well, it depends because, like Scott said that when he was doing it, he was like, "Oh, I realized when I was doing half of these encounters, I couldn't remember if you could fly." And it was funny because I could have picked a new second level spell, and if I had had flight, like the whole adventure would have been a cakewalk
Yeah.
because it wouldn't have been an issue. But I didn't have flight, so it was the amount of times I was like, "Oh my god, if I had flight, it'd be so easy." But yeah, that's the kind of stuff, the players can make stuff and the DM works around that, but you have a very structured thing. So but it's like you said, the past, I find the fact that it's like, it's the retro kind of appeal of playing D&D. It doesn't have to be an amazing system. It's the nostalgia factor of like, it does all it needs to do. It doesn't need to do anything. I don't think it needs to do anything so fancy. We're telling nice little stories, which are playing in a D&D thing. Yeah, the system's nothing special, and like there's probably other systems. Essentially, you could do what we're doing in any system. That's the downside of D&D, is that they make out that it's like something special, and it's not. You can literally play any system at all and run basic D&D things in. There's just a lot more books with, well, that's why most of the books that come out now don't have more monsters and more character choices. They have more, just stuff. They have adventures and setting things. Yeah, the system's fine. I mean, I prefer Pathfinder as a setting because it's got a bit more to it, but we all have the D&D books, so you can play through it. But yeah, I find it relatively inoffensive. Yeah, it used to wind me up a lot more that there was other systems that did more interesting things, but I actually quite like the fact it kind of sits in the background. There's a lot less metagaming.
Oh my gosh, no.
Compared to there is very, very simple reason. 2D20 is the one thing you have to say about it. It is the most metagamey game because you have momentum and fortune, and you have to decide how you're doing every single thing. True. So it is far too metagamey, and so Cortex is the same.
I think that there are different dimensions to metagaming. There are different manifestations of it, and I think the player-to-player talk and planning and use of rules, that's a meta piece. Player knowledge.
Yeah, that's why you have a problem.
And player expectation that player knowledge trumps anything in the story, that kills 5e. That's one of the things that drives a stake through it, because it's, well, this spell goes exactly 110 feet, so I'm exactly here, and I know what that monster does. And I'm like, this is just, there's no wonder or magic to it. It's just screwing around with your character sheet.
I think because we haven't played that much 5e, we don't know that stuff. We're not having that problem. Because it's like, I don't know what all the monsters do. I know the monsters that I've used, and I haven't memorized this. Even most spells, I have no idea of the range. So I don't know what every class does.
That's good of you, though.
Yeah,
that's good of you. For whatever reason, anyway.
Well, I haven't played enough 5e for that to ever become an issue. Whereas we have more of that kind of problem in 2D20, where Brian has got to sit in there trying to decide, is it more effective to increase my amount of damage dice or to do an extra attack and that kind of stuff. But I 2D20 prefers that. But we have all these resources for 5e, so we're using them. But yeah, it's a shame you're not having as much fun as I am, but I'm quite enjoying it.
Well, that in part is why I'm doing what I'm doing. What I've been doing for the last 3 months is working on this 2D20 World Builders game, which is why we're here today, to talk about this and talk about some of the system and some of the story decisions that I've made as something of a teaser for this thing. Because once again, I need to, this thing needs to be at least successful enough that I can buy the private island, or at least get a down payment on the thing. And there will be, you know what? I'll put like a Chalicombe land somewhere on the island. There'll be like a little place where you can come and visit and hang out and stuff like that. And it'll be shady. It won't be too bright.
I think you're going to be disappointed by it. I mean, you're going to make more money than I've made on any of my stuff, as witnessed by your initial thing. But yeah, I don't think you're getting
okay. So you don't
don't give up the day job.
No, I won't. No, I won't. Day job's good. Okay. So where do you want to start? You tell me, because you're asking me about this stuff.
Well,
I'm gonna
before we
fill it
get to your
in.
question, what is so what you asked me to do this last week. What's your elevator pitch for your
Okay.
game?
Okay. The game is called Ahris or Ahris, depends on how you want to pronounce it. Ahris, and that could be Ahris. That could be more like heiress, like an heiress, like an heir but female. Um, Soft R, hard R. I'm leaving that wide open. I'm not going to be a pronunciation Nazi. But it is what I'm trying to do with the SRD is create a set of rules that can stand in for what I'm calling traditional fantasy. That is like first edition, second edition, kind of OSR-ish fantasy, where there isn't a rule for everything by design. There are core mechanics and different, like, call them like primary categories of manifestation of that core mechanic, that people can use to make rulings. And then there's a core set of rules to answer the most prominent questions we always ask in these kinds of games, like, do I hack the goblin's head off? Can I smash through the door? Does my spell work? Do I understand the ancient script? Do we find the hidden valley when we're looking for it? All those kinds of things the system does. And the rest of it, a significant amount of the rest of it, I'm trying to leave as flexible, based on clear guidance for how to use that core mechanic, but leave it to a table, a group of people playing it, as to how they want to do those things. Instead of, again, I don't want something where people are going to be encouraged to flip through lots of, we got to look up that rule. F that. Make a ruling based on that short list of common ways to answer questions. When it comes to the story side of it, I'm taking a kind of a two-pronged approach. And the first book, which I hope will be out by June, the first book will have a like 30,000 foot view introduction to the world of Ahris. And Ahris is a colony. It is a colony that is established by a polity that is run by very ancient elves. And they set up this colony, I guess this would be the easiest way to say it, as like an overflow place for those younger races that reproduce so often. And so the elves kind of govern everything from the background. So they set up these colonies in different places in this world. They very strictly control knowledge. They control magic. But something has changed over the last century in this colony that has forced or led to the degree of elven power and elven management has decreased significantly in the last few generations. So like a power vacuum is starting, or is coming into being. In the initial book, that world is that backdrop is pretty thin. Like I said, 30,000 foot view. And the ideal is someone would get this and say, I'd like to run D&D style adventures, but I don't want to play D&D rules because they suck. Or I don't want to go all the way back to these like super stripped down OSR stuff. Like, that's too light, but D&D now is too much of like superheroes with swords. I don't want to play something super crunchy. I want to play like a 3X clone. I like 2d20, or I like 2d20, and I want to run kind of old school fantasy stuff. That's what this can do. And then my hope is that if it is at least moderately successful, whatever that's supposed to mean, if there's interest, I'm working on the first supplement, which will be a more detailed take on the world, the politics, things like that, so that you can map that onto it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if people are more interested in which would be my gut feeling, the rules for playing a fantasy game in 2D20, in which case you can expand that way by giving them more of that. Or, if people like your setting, then you can do more.
I really went back and forth on whether, like, how much did I want to integrate the rules with my setting ideas from the get-go, and I decided to do it in reverse, that the supplement will provide, okay, this is how you would tweak these archetypes, which I'll get to, and this is how you tweak some of the magic to make it fit Ahris. But instead of doing that on the front end, I'm instead providing something that you could do that with, but then also if you wanted to run Isle of Dread, or you wanted to run the Keep on the Borderlands, or you want to run against the Giants, or you want to, any of those kinds of things. If you wanted to grab one of the current 5e campaigns, like, Rime of the Frost Maiden or whatever, and you wanted to run that, but not using 5e rules, I think that translating that, not necessarily converting, like, really crunchy mechanically, but translating that into this would be really easy. And that's been something that's been in the back of my mind the whole time.
All right. So you gave me a list of questions, so I'm going to slowly work my way through these. We'll start with the nice easy one. What changes have you made to the rules as presented in the SRD?
Okay. I decided to go with, I think I stuck with the most basic layer of rules pretty closely. 6 stats, 6 skills. Momentum works as it always does. Threat, not doom, it's called threat, works as it always does. Fortune, I went with fortune, not determination, works as it does. There are a handful of different price points for some of the momentum spends and threat spends, but not many. There were some pieces of Conan that I decided to use. Like, for example, reactions are bought with threat, and that's a cumulative increase in a given round. What the hell else was it? The character creation it's a loose life path. It's not wedded to the world.
Right.
It's wedded to, like, it represents the different steps in someone's life up to the point where they would pick up a sword and decide to go be a murder hobo. And so that could fit into any world, but I will, in the supplement, wrap those things more tightly with the setting. But so there is a life path where you work through, and much like any of the Modifius life paths, you pick up skills and you pick up attributes over time, and then you have small parcels of extra points to spend at each step, and then some freebie points at the end. I also offer just a flat point-based system. If you just, like, I don't want to deal with life path. I just, this is how many points I get for attributes. This is how many points for skills. One of the things that I did with talents, or the thing that I did with talents, is I adopted the John Carter of Mars approach, which is there is no list of talents. There's a set of instructions for how to create them yourself.
Yeah.
And you get a certain number of points at character creation to make your own talents. I am a big fan of personalized, custom, idiosyncratic, not weird, but, like, just different characters, instead of, oh, you have that off the shelf talent, I have that off the shelf talent, and then these two supposedly very different characters are behaving in the exact same way. So talents are created by the players. So that's a bit of a departure from, I think, the norm for 2D20 now.
Have you put some example ones in as well as just a handful?
Yes.
Or is it right? Cool.
Yes. Yeah. There's and also I went with focuses like Star Trek Adventures, where they float, where you can plug them into any attribute skill combination where they're relevant. However, one thing that I did that's with focuses that's different from any of the current 2D20 games is that they have ratings. Focuses are rated from 1 to 3. Skills only go from 1 to 4. Focuses are less expensive to increase with experience. Skills are more expensive to increase with experience, but skills are by nature broader.
So in pretty much every version of Modifius games, like 2D20 games I can think of, skills always go to 5, and then focuses along with that will then also go. So is there a reason your skills are only going to 4 and your focuses are only going to 3?
When you determine your target number, it's attribute plus skill plus relevant focus.
Oh, okay.
And if the focus then has a point total to it, that then, like in Star Trek Adventures or Octoon Cthulhu, for example, if you roll at or beneath your skill, that gets you and you have a focus, a relevant focus. Okay, you have to have a focus in play on a roll to be eligible for a critical success beyond just rolling a 1. So a critical success is always a 1. But remember, with Star Trek Adventures, if you have a focus in play, at or beneath your
discipline
is a critical success. What I do with this is, if you have a discipliner in play, at or beneath your skill plus your focus gives you a critical success. And so my idea is that if you have focused training or experience in this narrow area, and you really work to develop that, when you use that, you're more likely to achieve notable success. Like if you really, really practice with a hammer a lot, well, if I give you a hammer, you're probably more likely to do something noteworthy with it than average Joe, who's just like good with things that he can swing at stuff.
So you're going to be getting more critical successes in yours than, well, I say than in other ones, but then there's things like John Carter where you can get a lot of critical successes.
Yeah.
Because
now remember though, you can only you always get a critical success with a 1. Like that's just 2d20 standard. The only other way you can get a critical success in this is by having a focus that's in play on that roll. But then that focus,
said you're rolling under the focus, the skill plus the focus, that could go up to 7. So that
correct.
That's higher.
That would take a lot of experience. You can only start with.
It's still doable.
Yeah, you can only start with a focus. Your maximum focus is 2, and you can only start with 1 at that rank.
Oh, okay.
Your maximum skill at character generation is 3, and you can only have 1 skill that starts at that rank. So you would have 1 target number that would give you a 5 or below for critical successes at character generation. Everything else is going to be lower than that, and it's something that you would then have to build over time. So that was a call that maybe one of the most common departures.
Yeah, that sounds like it is, because the idea of we've had numbered focuses, but when they worked instead of the skills, if you were.
Yeah, and they were always the ones with numbered focuses. They were always hard. They were
they were
permanently associated with a single skill. Mine aren't.
Yeah, they were. I was going about sticking on character creation now. There's 3 things. But firstly, what are your 6 attributes and what are your 6 skills?
Okay, the attributes are they are brawn, agility, stamina, reason, insight, presence.
How did you come up with that?
I wonder. Now, one thing I did do though, those may sound like synonyms.
You did rename them all, so well done.
Those do sound like synonyms to 6 other. They do. And for the most part, they are, because I actually think that spread is representative without getting too fiddly. One thing I did though is I moved. Presence is, normally you'd say, well, maybe that's personality or that's charisma. Presence is some of that, but it's rooted in like force of will.
Yeah.
Like someone's confidence. So in other words, when you would save for like a will or a discipline type of save, presence is the attribute that it comes off of. Not like insight is more intuition, making leaps of understanding or understanding things that aren't necessarily reason based or figuring out things, sensing things. Reason is just processing power and knowledge. And then obviously stamina, agility, and brawn are what they sound like.
Yeah, I mean, they're all fine. One of the funny things with D&D is you kind of over a long time just got used to what certain things let you do. The fact that dexterity should really only be hand stuff, but was really full body agility, but you just got used to it. And the fact that wisdom did a whole bunch of different stuff which doesn't apply to wisdom at all, but that's just what we got used to. So actually, your names are probably more spot on there. And then what 6 skill areas have you used?
The skills are fight, interact, know, move, operate, survive. So I stuck very closely to the ones in the SRD.
I can't think what wait a minute. So I was thinking, why have you got interact and operate? But you mean interact as in with people and operate as in with things?
Correct.
Because those are the same thing. Oh no, wait a minute. No, they're not.
Yeah.
I actually can't remember what the SRD ones have. I remember fight and move.
I like the Star Trek Adventures, the disciplines that are broad. They're broad, they're much wider, but they're more shallow than a focus. And like I said, those only go to 4. but they're less expensive to increase with experience. And trying to think if there's anything. They're pretty straightforward as to what they are. The one thing I wanted to do with them, I was dead set on they must be verbs, because in your skills you're doing something, you're taking an action, so they must be verbs. Focuses, much like Star Trek Adventures, there's no list.
Yeah, it's just
there are suggestions. My guess is that people will default to some of them, but there is no formal list. Like melee weapons is one that you could choose. That's an example I provide. Ranged weapons is one. If you as a spellcaster, we'll get to that later, if you want to focus on a particular type of magic, there are 6 primary categories. If you want to focus on one of those, you would just choose the name of the categories. I focus on those kinds of spells.
So you could actually have melee weapons, and so ranged weapons rather than specific ranged weapons would be a focus.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to get so fiddly as to be like, my father's broadsword. That's it.
Yeah,
that's your uncle's broadsword. You don't get that bonus. I don't.
Yeah, I'd probably still split that down.
But now here's the thing though, is that if there's a GM and some players who say, you know what, melee weapons is too broad, I'll say swords, and they all look at each other and go, you know what, swords is a focus, not melee weapons. That's fine.
Yeah.
And I don't want to sound like I'm harping, but those kinds of decisions, the how narrow the band is in one of those categories, that's not up to me. I can't stand that when a game is like so prescriptive. On the other hand, if it's not prescriptive at all, you're like, why am I buying this? Yeah. There's nothing in here. So that how narrow that band is, that would be up to my default is melee weapons, ranged weapons. But if you want to narrow it beyond that, of course you could.
And then the other character creation I was going to ask about, which you did hint, because you talked about talents already, you've gone through them. You mentioned earlier archetypes.
Yes.
So, because I can't think archetypes, I don't think are really like a standard SRD thing. It's just something we've seen in a lot of things.
Well, think about this. There are things that are akin to classes or archetypes, or like here's a general category. Like you look at Star Trek Adventures, you have the 3 departments, and then you have the subdivisions within each of the departments. Look in Achtung Cthulhu, you've got and I think, are they called archetypes?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're called archetypes in Achtung Cthulhu. I mean, that's the main one I think of, that because like some of the older games have like they're called careers. They're much more, and you can have multiple ones. And again, Star Trek, it's weird because your kind of archetyping kind of matches. It's your vision matches your discipline. So that's when Achtung Cthulhu actually had archetypes, which gave you because it gave you like equipment, and it gave you some of your skills, and it gave you talent. So got an awful lot of stuff from your archetype, and also if you would be able to, whether you could do magic or not was dependent, I think, on your archetypes.
Yeah,
I don't think you get access to it any other way.
Yeah.
So are your archetypes doing a similar thing to Achtung Cthulhu? Well, I mean, and what are some of your archetypes?
Okay, so my archetypes, just to make life easy for people, are cleric, druid, entertainer, which pained me to include, but I did, explorer, merchant, outlaw, sorcerer, warrior, wizard. So I cover. I don't have a monk.
I always think monk's a really weird one, because to me monk is very setting dependent.
Yeah.
The idea that in any kind of 5e game you can have someone, I mean, I think like one of Scott's characters in one of our campaigns is a monk. You kind of have to have a background reason for why one character has to do martial arts and no one else. It doesn't make. Why is
one complete? I'm trained to like harden my body and whatever. So I don't have that. Each of the archetypes provides there are some stat and skill boosts associated with each of them. There is a small kit of generic equipment that comes with it. That's somewhat unique to each archetype. And then for each of the archetypes, there's anywhere from 1 to 3 talents that are archetype specific. Because I think niche control to a certain extent is useful. and people tend to like that. Like you want to say, I'm the this. You're trying to direct a new player. Do you want to like, creep around or hit things? Okay. So each of these archetypes has 1 to 3 talents that you choose one of. And depending on the nature of the archetype, the talents are, they're flexible. But like for example, choosing one of the spell casting ones, the cleric, the druid, the sorcerer, and the wizard, your talent is that archetype, which then gives you
Cool.
access to spell casting. The other ones you have, you have, like for example, warrior. There are 4 different archetypes or 4 different talents that you can choose from. You choose one, and that in a way is like that's how you narrow the focus of what kind of warrior are you, or what
Yeah.
kind of explorer are you, what kind of so it's not just oh, I chose to be a warrior and all warriors aside from what I do are the same. And I did this also not only to guide, to provide some assistance and guidance to players, but also to GMs as they're thinking about building NPCs. Like, how can I differentiate and make my group of warriors that are going to face the PCs, make them a little bit different from one another?
Yeah, so you had a question here. Have you created any new rules? You've already covered the fact that you've the idea of the focuses with numbers.
Yeah.
Is there and you've done some magic, so we'll get to magic in a minute. Is it before we get onto magic? That'll be my next one. And the other side, is there anything else you added which is new or different?
Okay, one thing, not necessarily new, definitely not new in fantasy games, but I want to just be clear: the character races, dwarf, gnome, elf, half elf, human.
What? No Dragon Ball?
Stop. Mine's a dragonborn gnome, hybrid paladin thief, 10th level. No.
Did you not say halfling?
Stop it.
You got gnomes.
Gnomes.
Yeah, you
Gnomes.
got that again. That was one I don't remember ever seeing because I'm used to. I don't remember gnomes from back in the day. I just remember halfling because halflings were in basic. Yeah. So I think I just missed gnomes.
I talked with a number of people, and I got there was significant pressure that you got to have dwarves, but you have to have like a short, plucky people. And yes. So I can stomach gnomes, so gnomes are there. Now in the Ahris setting, elves, the elven race is actually an elven race in society is actually bifurcated into two groups, and player characters on the Ahris side of things, when I really get into the details of that, player characters will only come from one of those. And there's a reason why. The elder elves, not playable at all. In this version that I'm writing right now, that's indicated, but the elves that you would choose to play are by default the younger elves, not the elder elves.
Yeah.
So now your question about other rules. I did expand on the the mobs and squads rules that we find in a number. And then also in Conan the Mercenary, there are skirmish rules. So if you wanted to run combats like 20, 30 characters, you can do that using the mob and a modification of the mob and squad rules. I took that a few steps further, and I added those in, providing players with options to not only control small groups of similar NPCs, but also order them to do different things. So if you wanted to run a combat where you've got some, like your character's in charge of a group of NPCs directly, and you're fighting, the hordes or something like that. But there's also mechanics in there for how you can control other groups that are doing other things, like protecting the castle wall or preventing reinforcements from showing up, things like that. I added that in as well.
Cool.
Now you want to talk
about... sorry, no, I got lost track because I was still thinking about gnomes and halflings. Still the idea that I never really understood why there was both, particularly when what I've seen as the write-up of halflings or gnomes is like overlaps with what I'd consider to be half. So then they're so close together, it's like, why? Yeah, and it's like, why do gnomes exist? If halflings are doing,
what it is, it's why do both exist?
Yeah, why do both exist?
So I nixed halflings. It's gnomes.
Fair enough. Yeah,
there it is.
So magic, then you said you have it. You have 4 different. I mean, how are you dealing with that? That'd be the first thing. Do you have 4 completely different styles of
No,
magic, or do you
no,
have?
actually, you know what? Originally, I had this idea that the magic for each of those archetypes would function differently at the table,
Yeah.
because I just thought, hey, if you're powered by nature, or you are in contact with some spirits of nature, like, a tree decided to, whatever, it stands to reason that you would behave and your magic would function differently than someone who's channeling the power of their god.
Yeah. But
Through playtesting, well, through writing, that my gray hair I got more gray hair from that, and headaches too. And then through playtesting, this is one of these interesting points where it's like you can play out an idea in your head, but you need to put it in front of other people. I realized that if I had 4 different magic systems, that would become a nightmare for a GM.
Yeah.
And so I nixed that. What I've done instead is that mechanically the spells, they function the same in terms of how they're constructed, and I'll get to that in a moment. But the types of things, there are certain abilities, they're basically talents, but they belong to, like, the cleric has an ability to cast rituals, which is a certain type of use of a spell that a sorcerer cannot.
Right.
A wizard can do there are 2 things that a wizard can do regarding spells that none of the other archetypes can do. So each of them has something that is unique. And incidentally, I didn't go out of my way to be like, balance out the window, I don't care. And here the wizard gets to do, the wizard gets difficulty 1 for everything. It's not that at all. But I didn't sit down and try to crunch all kinds of numbers to make this perfectly balanced. So if someone looks at these 4 different archetypes, they may say, well, wait a minute, I don't like that. I think I don't like how that's out of balance. They're different.
Yeah.
They're just different. I'll throw this out there. All of the spellcasting classes have an additional stress track. And by the way, I have 2 stress tracks, Vigor and Resolve. And they function like stress tracks 2d20 wide. I add, for casters, they have an essence track. And the essence track is basically their magical juice, their points to cast magical juice. That sounds terrible. I'm going to cut that out.
Keep that in.
Anyway, each of those archetypes, they have a fixed essence. That's a stress track it's like a stress track. They just use up those points.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as wounds on the essence track. Okay. It's like dollars in your wallet getting burned up at Disney World, which I'm sure you're familiar with right now, very much so. Wizards, here's an example. Wizards, when they run out of essence, they can't cast any more spells for the scene. They're done. Actually, clerics and druids the same way. They run out of essence, they're done. Now, essence, like other stress tracks, regenerates at the end of a scene. Okay, more expensive, more powerful spells cost more to cast, so it's a balance,
Yeah.
But when a wizard runs out, they're done. When cleric and druid runs out, they're done. When a sorcerer runs out of essence, the sorcerer can continue to cast, because the sorcerer is like the playing with fire, force of will. He doesn't study. He just yanks his arcane power out of the ether somehow and forces it to do his will. He can continue to cast with no essence. But the cost of that is that the essence cost of the spell is challenge dice in threat generated.
Oh, that's cool.
So when you're trying to you're squeezing, reality to pull more power out of it, reality's like, oh, really?
I wonder where you were going to go with that, because I figured the other option was that you can keep casting spells, but you use your vigor or resolve.
Yeah, I thought about that, and I thought about doing that for the other archetypes. And I said, you know what? The sorcerer is going to be special. Sorcerer can cast with no essence, but it could pile up threat, and the GM's lap really quickly.
That
Now, on the
that'll
other
be
hand,
popular in a party of people. I'm going to keep casting spells. Stop it!
yeah, no,
Stop
exactly.
casting spells.
Exactly. But think about this though. If you're the guy who can I use my force of my will, I bend the universe to my will, he's not gonna listen to the other people in the
No.
party. The other people in the party are like, stop. And he's like, no, only more power for me. So
Look how much threat I can generate.
Huh?
Look, I was gonna say, look how much threat I can generate. Yeah, it's like,
now a wizard. Now here's another big difference. Wizards, the other three archetypes gain new spells by spending experience. They buy new spells with experience points. That's pretty straightforward. Wizards don't. Wizards do not have to spend experience to get new spells, but they have to find them.
Yeah.
So they have to find them scrawled on tomb walls or on scrolls or in tomes or learn them. It then gives the wizard a reason, an impetus to go out here and go adventuring or over there.
I was going to say there. That's like a farm.
Yeah, it's definitely over there. There. To find these things. And the wizard can add as many spells as he or she wants to their spell book. Now, they're still gated by how many they can cast because of their essence score. But each of the spell casting archetypes has something different and unique about it. And my intention is to add more of those to provide players with options. Like, well, instead of this special wizard only ability, I'll pick this one instead. So there'll be a list for each of them. So they're all really, there's a unique feel. Another thing also about the magic system, two things about it. Spells, there is no spell list. I'll have probably about 30 sample spells with an explanation of how they were built, but I have put together, and I think it works. I'm still working on it, finalizing it at least. You build spells. You use a point-based or point-buy system, a zero-sum point-buy system to build spells. So you have cost, in essence, you have difficulty for the dice, and then you have other things like range, damage, effects. For stuff that's non-combat, like I can levitate, can I carry someone? All those kinds of factors using traits. That's what I'm trying to do, is use effects, qualities, and traits. Those are existing knowns within 2d20. Using those and putting points to them. You have an economy by which you create your own spells. And remember I mentioned earlier that there are 6 categories of spells. Those categories are the 6 skills.
All right, cool. Oh, that's really clever then.
So each spellcasting archetype has a governing attribute. Like wizards cast everything using reason, but depending on the type of spell, they would cast using a different skill. So that prevents someone from becoming like the one-trick pony where they max out one attribute and one skill and they do everything. It enables you to spread things out, or forces you to.
And I like that in Acting Cthulhu, how they had like your actual casting for a spell was as an existing skill. You didn't have to they weren't adding spell casting skills. They were like, you can cast spells, but here's how you do it.
Right. So any spell
clever.
Any spell that does vigor damage, physical damage, or seeks to control or restrain someone physically, that's a fight spell. Anything that has to do with movement of the character or movement of others or movement of things, but not in a damage causing way, those are move spells. Sensory spells, understanding, perception spells, that's no. Any kind of mind effect spell, including those that might do resolve damage, those are interact spells. So I have explanations for, like, categorically what makes most sense to fit in here. And like operate is on things, survive is qualities on people.
I mean, I genuinely think that's the thing that is going to make your product sell, because that's the thing. 2d20 does not have that.
Right.
Okay, as much as you're like, I've only done 30. I haven't done a list of spells. I only have 30 spells. That's more spells than there's in Acting Cthulhu, to my knowledge, or at least it's ballpark. And that seems like, way more than you have the kind of, the spells you get in Conan and stuff. That's a lot of spells. But the fact that you've given a list of a rule set for how to build your own spells that's a big deal. That's the thing that people like. That's the thing that people want. This is why people wanted Elder Scrolls 2D20, because people wanted to be able to play a fantasy thing. And the thing that was missing was magic to me, because like monsters, which I'll come to in a second, monsters are relatively easy to come up with. They're not that hard. It's just a few stats on a bit of play. But coming up with spells in a way that is like, more or less, I know we say we don't want things to be balanced, but this is where you do need, you can't have a spell which is super easy to cast and does 20 combat die. That's ridiculous. So you do need some kind of idea on the spells of what the rule is going to be and for having them. So that sounds really, really good. That's going to be the thing I think that people are going to be like, oh, I want this, even if they don't want everything else you've done. If they're just the spell stuff.
Well, what's interesting about it is that what I've found, and I mean, it's been definitely a source of headaches over the last couple of months, because it's hard to balance, and there's that word, between being really narrative, and then it's like, why even write anything, or really prescriptive, and then it turns into Pathfinder, and I don't want that. But what's happening is that I wanted something. This is, and I've said this before about like one of the things I don't like about 5e is the power creep. And how incredibly powerful characters become by the time they hit like the high single and low double digit levels. You start out as a spellcaster, you might have an essence of 10 or 11, and spells, if you have a decent spell or two, those might cost 3 or 4 each like a halfway, an okay spell would cost you probably 3 or 4. A decent spell might cost you 5 or 6. So really, in a single encounter, you're only going to be able to cast probably 2 spells that are really worth writing home about. Now, if you decide to have another spell that really knocks it out of the park, that's it. You're going to cast that one spell and you're going to be done with it. What I did as part of the experience system, and I'm very happy with this, actually. I'm not trying to like toot my own horn, but this is something that I was like, finally, I get to do this. You can use experience points to change, to modify, to grow your spells.
That's cool.
So instead of just adding more and more and more and more spells, you say, okay, here's this cool spell that I do. I can like shoot fire at you. Well, when I started out, it was pretty weak. I could shoot fire at you from like a couple of feet away, and it did like okay damage, and that was it. Well, as I gain more experience and I get better, I'm going to make this more powerful. I'm going to make it so it has persistent damage or intense damage. I'm going to make the range farther. You can also spend experience on spells to make them less expensive for you to cast.
That's cool.
Which then answers the question of, well, what happens as I become a more experienced caster, but because of limits on skills and limits on attributes, your essence is going to top out.
Yeah.
So over time, you can make your spells less expensive to cast and more powerful. It'll take a while.
Yeah,
it'll take a while, but I'm proud of that, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that players who like to play spellcasters, they want to tinker.
Yeah,
and so this gives them a system that's exactly what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds really good. One of the sort of the thing that's annoying about D&D spells is that you're always trying to get to that spell. Like, I've got a 4th level spell card. I want them to be a 5th level spell card, because then I get Fireball.
Right.
But what I really want is to be able to take some of the spells I've already got and I sort of tinker with them, make them more interesting. I mean, that's the one thing that Genesis half lets you do, because when you cast spells, you cast everything on the fly, and they didn't do a very good job of, like, what I wanted was a rule that let you build spells, but you had these set spells you'd pre-written, which is what yours does, and then you cast them. What you had to do there is every single time you had to cast the spell on the fly and build it, which then took ages.
Yeah.
And that, that wasn't the best way of doing it. It's like that's a full release game, and they didn't go as far as you've done. And then other things are the same. So one quick thing. Can you cast Essence 0 spells, like really weedy, essentially cantrips, really weedy spells, but at least you can cast them when you've got or they don't use any essence to cast them?
The only I've been thinking about that, but the only place that is available already is that only the wizard has essentially an at-will detect magic.
Right.
That costs nothing. And it's because they've trained so
Yeah.
much.
The only reason I think of that is that that's the one thing I really like about fight, and I think Pathfinder does as well. That like old versions of D&D, you would have a cast, particularly at low level, when you ran out of spells, you then couldn't do anything. So you had to carry a crossbow around with you, that was always just seemed really naff. Whereas at least in 5e, you can burn all of your spell slots, but you have some cantrips.
Yeah.
And they're not very good spells, but it means instead of sitting there going, I pull out my crossbow, and then you think, because then you might have a character who their crossbow is better than some of their spells. You'd be like, why am I even doing magic? So actually, yeah, I like the idea of cantrips. So yeah, if you could have essence 0 spells that are just not very good, but at least it's
there's something.
Well, that'd be cool.
You can use fortune. A fortune spend is you can use that to regenerate essence.
That's a big spend though. That's not
some, but I mean, but it's one of those things that there if your back is really against the wall, there are ways, or you could just be a sorcerer and generate heaps and heaps of threat.
I think you've kind of, because you've got, I've skipped one question. You had one question about settings, but I think we've taken up a lot of time, so that's something we can always come back to later.
Yeah.
We'll stick to mostly the system now. So you had a question, what has been the hardest part of this process? From this, it sounds like magic, which is pretty sure it was already the answer.
You know what? Combat spells were really easy. It was the utility spells. It still is. The utility spells is where that, frankly, that's going to be the place where I've gotten to the point in terms of prescriptiveness that I don't want to go beyond it. I don't want to go beyond adding more definitions of variables to hem in, to supposedly create this system that's always going to produce the same things no matter where people are playing this. Utility spells were the hardest because
it's much harder to apply a value to something which doesn't have a set, it might be a story thing as opposed to something else, or something that seems really straightforward and then is horribly open to player abuse when
so that was the magic system is the hardest. You said you had a question about like monsters and NPCs and stuff like that.
Do you have monsters? Have you pre-statted a bunch of monsters and NPCs? There you go, because I forgot.
About 70 of them.
That's a lot.
Well, and what I did was I'm sticking with the 3 tiers of NPCs. I have minor, noteworthy, and major. I have my suggestion, especially for minor NPCs, which I'm really leaning back toward, or pointing back, I think, toward like 4th edition minions. Where what defines a minor NPC primarily is the fact that it can only take 1 wound, not how much damage it can necessarily deal out. But there are guidelines for like aside from the minion, the minor NPCs got to only take 1 wound. Once you add more wounds to it, it's not a minor NPC anymore. But I have tried to streamline the creation of minor NPCs so that really it's like if this is a multifaceted figure, you're looking at one side only. Because really, when you think about it in a scene, the town guard is only there to guard. The town guard is not there to play chess with. The town guard is to ask you for your papers when you walk through the gate. That's it. So I really have tried to streamline the creation of and the stats for minor NPCs to treat them as like the one trick with maybe a slight backup pony, and that's it. Relied very heavily on traits and qualities, and I've got lists of those to add to NPCs to make them, and monsters to make construction of them easy. And what I did too is I've sat down after I created the system for creating these things, and I statted up some just generic stuff like town guard, the bandit chief, the things like that, wolf, whatever. I looked at some iconic creatures from mythology and things like that, and then said, okay, how can I use my rules to stat up a Medusa or a wyvern or a whatever? And maybe I'm cheating because I know the system because I wrote it, but it works. Creature creation, I've found it's quick. Once I got in the rhythm, like I said, I spit out about, I think I have like 70 or 71, something
That's
like
cool.
that.
Yeah, it's good.
I
I
have
think
pictures, I have
that's
art.
that's useful that you've got a bunch of, that's one of the other things that people like, that someone's already statted up a bunch of
Yeah.
monsters. I never found statting up monsters overly difficult in any system, even in D&D, where it, like, there's a monster stat like looks really complicated in D&D, but you can kind of just wing it with, like,
Yeah.
AC, hit points, their
And the
basic
players
attack.
don't know.
Yeah. So it was never really, I mean, like, I can't remember, but the systems I've run in the past where, like, where an NPC literally is sort of like how much damage it does and how much damage it takes. And
That's it.
that's it.
Yeah.
It's literally it. You don't need anything else.
Well, what I tried to do with the creatures that I've got some animals, including monstrous animals. I have monsters, I have NPCs, and then I have undead. I put undead in their own category. And what I've sought to do is provide like kind of categorical examples.
Yeah.
Like I have some dragons, I have some like goblin types, I have different kinds of things, so that if someone is looking and saying, well, you don't have one of these monsters, and I have this module or this campaign I want to translate from another system, there's something there that's akin to it that'll get you off and running with the creation system.
So our last question then, because it's been quite a grilling. What, if anything, do you still need to finish?
Okay.
Zero spells.
I am what?
Essence zero spells.
Yeah, well, okay, I'll revisit that. I'll revisit the possibility of zero essence spells. I am rereading the whole thing now. I have not reread the entire thing front to back in a while, and because I've been working on separate sections, so I need to do that. But when I need to finalize the magic rules, I think I have. I just need to let it sit for a couple of days, go back through, create some more spells, and see if I can break it. That's what I need to do with that. I need to write some more world background. I found a person on Reddit who made this map, and is going to do some other ones. And I love it. It's simple, but it's colorful, and I think it evokes a kind of a feel. There's lots of open space to fill things in, and that's what I wanted. It's not very, super detailed.
I'm trying to work out if they use the same software I do, probably.
Wonderdraft.
No, there's a thing called Incarnate, which is on internet. Which
no, this is Wonderdraft. So I have some more world background to write, but not too much, because again, I'm trying to dial it back to, when you think, I mean, even the Greyhawk box set that came out in the early 80s didn't define the whole world, not in great gory detail. It really wasn't until
we had this conversation previously about how much did you want to put in, because if people are getting it for the sort of the rules, and you don't want loads of setting, but if you have no setting, then it's really hard to explain what a sorcerer is or what a gnome is. So you had that balance.
The last major block that I have not written, I need to write the introductory adventure.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
No, you don't.
I promised it. I'm doing it. So I need to do that. And also something that I'm providing is, and I thought myself quite clever for this. I've got about 20 pages of all the major tables and lists, like weapon effects and qualities and NPC effect or qualities and special abilities, monster special attacks, all those kinds of things that you'd like on a screen, but are spread throughout the book. I have all of those reprinted and reformatted as a block of printable pages at the end of the book. And then I've taken all the weapon effects and all the armor qualities and some other things like that, and I got a template for, like, those like Avery business cards you can print in a printer.
No, I have no idea what that means. But anyway,
okay,
I know what a business card is.
Yeah, they're like, it's a template that is 2 by 10.
Okay.
And so you just create business cards, and you can buy the perforated, pre-formatted sheets that you just dump into your printer. So I'm taking weapon effects and weapon and armor qualities and those kinds of things that are so big in 2D20 rules, and I'm formatting them into cards. So if somebody wants to print them, they can make their life easy and just stick a business card template in there, the sheet, print out a bunch of these and just hand out cards at the table.
Then you can make a DM screen.
The
I have
last
it like
major. Go ahead.
ages and ages ago. I did it because like Savage World at one point sold their own where it was just a blank DM screen with plastic wallets.
Yeah, I
But
remember
I just
that.
made my own. I just put some plastic wallets on some card and just taped it all together. And I've used that for things like Conan in Infinity, maybe not Infinity, but things like kind of what I never bought the proper, or I didn't have the GM screen at one point. So I just printed all it, and I use it for loads of games. I just print the sheets I want, put some colored pictures on the outside, print the sheets I want, and there we go. They're in there.
Yeah.
And yeah, then I still end up buying the GM screens anyway.
The last thing I need, write the adventure. I need to find cover art. I need to find someone who will do cover art that does not suck.
No. Yeah, unfortunately, I can only do 3D art, and 3D art never quite looks as good as
No.
proper 2D art. And I suspect 2D art is probably expensive for a decent front page.
Yeah, and I'm going back and forth as to what I want. Now, I love this. Did I tell you where I found most of the art?
No.
I found this website with a bunch of black and white line drawings from books from like the 16 and 1700s and into the 1800s. They're all long out of copyright. That's what the website exists for. I'll reference it. But a significant amount of the art throughout the book is from that. And then I stumbled on really an artist who had drawn a bunch of fantasy monsters and put all of it into the public domain explicitly. You can use this for whatever you want, even commercial purposes. So I reached out to her and asked her, hey, I saw this. I saw what your community use license is. I still thought it respectful to ask. And she said, yeah, go ahead, use it for whatever you want. So I have art. I have art of, of beasties. I have art of scenes. I have art of characters. I just need a front cover. So there you have it.
Oh, there you go. I mean, I guess can't you take the proceeds of your previous 2D20 thing and put that towards commissioning a front cover?
Maybe I'll use this map.
I mean, you can cheat. You can just do a box, old style D&D where there was a picture in the middle and text at the top and text at the bottom, and then you can put the map in the middle, and then you can always replace it afterwards if you make a ton of money.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, like a full page D&D style full page picture is awesome, but I can't imagine they're cheap.
I actually don't. That's not really what I'm drawn to. Like what's on the cover of like the PHB or like a Pathfinder, but I'm really not actually drawn to that. So we'll see. I gotta figure that out.
Yeah, hit up Wayne Reynolds. I'm sure he's cheap.
Oh yeah, no.
How many pockets and belts do you want on your characters?
Buckles. Buckles. Buckles and angular faces and like the peacock hair. No thanks. I don't like that style actually. Oh, one last thing. This is really cool. I had I don't know why, I just felt like it. But I reached out to the management of a sadly now disbanded death metal band and asked them if they minded if I used their song titles as things. And they said, yeah, go ahead. Just don't use our logo.
Cool.
So that'll be in there too.
Well, it sounds like you're almost there.
Yeah. And incidentally, this is my last piece. It will be somewhere around, I gotta laugh at myself with this. With everything, it's going to be about maybe 220 pages, something like that.
Your little fantasy guide, which is bigger than some full role-playing games. I won't say it's bloated because that would imply that there's a bunch of extra garbage in it. But there's the introductory adventure.
Yeah, the introductory adventure is probably gonna be 15 or 20 pages or so.
But still, 200 pages without that is pretty good. I'd be interested to look at how many core books are less than 200 pages. Something
else I've done too, especially earlier in the book and in the magic chapter, is I wrote a lot of examples. I have a cast of, call them my iconic characters, and I explain and build on explanations and then explain. I explain over and again how spells are made. Each of the sample spells, I've got, I think 23 or 24 sample spells, something like that maybe a little more. For each of them, I actually explain mechanically how the spell was put together, because I really want people to get as close to understanding, like, okay, let me wrap my head around how to do this without it being overly prescriptive. So there's lots of explanations. And I know that's one thing that I've always said is missing in 2D20 books.
You might have to quit your day job. Modiphius might come calling for you to write up the Elder Scrolls fantasy game.
The problem
and put
with
examples in it. They'll be like, we don't really get this idea of examples. So can you do it for us?
Can you go back through and rewrite? Yeah, I don't. Hey, I don't know if they could afford me, but
no, I don't think that the money they would pay would match what I don't know. I have no idea how much you get paid, but yeah, I don't imagine that game writers who do it for a full-time job are actually earning that much money.
No. But anyway, yeah. So there we are. And I'm going to make a nice classic dungeon crawl style adventure with some twists in it, because I want to show people, like, you can do that. You can do this old stuff and have a great time with it and not have it feel stale.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. You can visit our show's homepage at anchor.fm/fluffncrunch. That's FLUFFNCRUNCH. We would really appreciate feedback and reviews on whatever podcasting platform you're listening to this on. Thanks so much.